How do you feel about the people that think they know what's best for you? Meaning the elite, they're like, you should do this because we know what's right for you. We're smarter. We have the fancy degrees. We come with the right last names. What do you think about those names? What do you think about the establishment? Do you think they know what's best for you? Now, you may be watching this getting irritated, saying, Pat, how could you ask me a question like that? I've been following Valuetainment for over 10 years. You know I'm a free thinker. You know I think for myself. You know I like to be an entrepreneur. I feel we can do it better collectively. I don't like to be confined in a controlled environment. Perfect. So you may say, Pat, I have no clue where you're going with this. Just brace for impact. I'm going to explain it to you. Look, in life, we're all going to fall in one of three categories. You're either part of the oblivious crowd. They have no clue what's going on. They don't read. They don't pay attention. They're just kind of living their lives as is, right? Two, you're part of the establishment. You're trying to control everybody and what they're doing. You join their camp. Or you're part of the anti-establishment saying, I don't know about that. I think there's a better way of doing this. I kind of don't like to be controlled. I want to find the other guys that are free thinkers. Let's see if we can do it better, right? So today I'm going to make a case to you, no matter where you're living in the world, if you're free financially, if you live in a place that you get to kind of live your life the way you want, I'm telling you, it's because somebody part of the anti-establishment movement risked their life so you and I can have that freedom. So my case will be made on what the risk is to be part of this side, what the risk is to be part of this side, and what the risk is to be part of the oblivious. If you get value from this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. But if it gets you thinking and you want to argue with other people, share it with others. Let's get right into it. So, anti-establishment, establishment, the oblivious. Obviously, if you're going to be part of the oblivious, the world dictates what your life's going to be like. You pick and choose. But if you're part of the anti-establishment movement, you're part of the group that wants to fight for freedom. This side wants to control. So think anti-establishment freedom, think establishment control. Elite, majority. Pretty heavy topic here, so bear with me. Before we get started, if your English is like mine and it's not your first language, let's look at the definition of each word as well as the synonyms linked to these words. So the word anti-establishment is a belief which stands in opposition to the conventional social, political, and economic principles of a society. The term was first used in a modern sense in 1958 by the British magazine New Statesman to refer to its political and social agenda. So if we look at synonyms and similar words to anti-establishment, you will find alternative, non-traditional, unconventional, underground, pioneering, state-of-the-art, trailblazing. Those are some of the words that are linked to anti-establishment. You pick and choose which one is yours. Let's look at establishment. Definition of the establishment describes the dominant social group, the elite, who control a polity, an organization, or an institution. And if we look at synonyms or similar words to it, you will find the authorities, the system, the ruling class, the regime, bureaucracy, status quo, big brother, and the list goes on. Again, you pick and choose. Do you relate to the anti-establishment or the establishment? Now let's look at the oblivious. The definition of oblivious, not aware of or not concerned about what is happening around one. And if we look at synonyms or similar words, you will find unaware, unconscious, heedless, unmindful, insensible, ignorant, blind, deaf, unobservant, unconcerned, insensitive, detached, removed. I can give a few more, but I think you get the idea. You get to pick and choose again. Are you more anti-establishment, establishment, or oblivious? If you are a free thinker, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are an entrepreneur, you automatically fall under the category of anti-establishment. Now, having said that, look, if you choose to be part of the oblivious crowd, you already know life is a little bit more peaceful because you don't have a lot of decisions to make. The pressure's not on you. It's just kind of like, I'm going to live my life. I don't care what they do. I don't have any control over it anyways. So there's actually peace in that, but the bad is somebody can control you. But there's pros and cons in both being anti-establishment and establishment. Here's what they are. If you are pro-establishment, the pros are the elite has your back. They will underreport mistakes you make. They will make excuses for you. They will defend you. You'll automatically start off with a resume. Their contacts are available to you. Their resources are available to you. And they carry a bigger stick, and they're generally more feared than the anti-establishment at first. And by the way, the oblivious relies mainly on the establishment because the establishment controls the oblivious. It's almost like it's their asset. The oblivious are the most valuable asset to the establishment. So now let's look at the con on the pro-establishment. You are a slave. They control you. You have to do what they tell you to do. You give up your freedom. It's an element of being a puppet. Deep down inside, you feel like you have to compromise your values and principles. Now let's look at the pros of anti-establishment. You win over people, okay? There's a real loyalty there. You're fighting for your beliefs. You are free. You get to pick and choose which fights you want to fight and which ones you don't. You get to make decisions that match your values and principles. You find other people like yourself. So now let's look at the con. The con is the elite will demonize you. They have more power than you. They will over-scrutinize you. In essence, they'll amplify whatever you do wrong. So let's just say if it's a 2, they'll sell it as a 9. The elite expect perfection from you. The elite will spread rumors about you. The elite will make it hard for you to find a job or compete in a marketplace. The risk of being part of the establishment is 100 times bigger than being part of the establishment. If you're still watching this, you're a little bit crazy. I want to tell you this, but I called it. This thing's not going to get a lot of views because some people are going to say this thing is crazy, but I'm talking to you openly and freely because I am a guy that left Iran, that lived at a refugee camp, that came to America for one word, and it's freedom. And that's why I'm fighting for it, even after I've already made my money, because I know there's other people like you out there that are going to watch this saying, I relate to this. So now, our case study today, John F. Kennedy. Let's get right into it. So what made John F. Kennedy unique? One, they did not need to sell out to the establishment because they had their own money. Matter of fact, when you look at the campaign contribution, when he ran for office, 50% of the campaign's total budget came from his father, Joseph Kennedy. However, Joseph Kennedy was quoted saying, I'll spend every dollar I have to get my son elected. JFK's campaign cost somewhere around $20 to $25 million, and Joseph Kennedy at the time was worth $400 million in 1960. If you're saying, Pat, why is that such a big deal? Because most people who run for office, they don't really put any money into the campaign. I don't even know if Hillary Clinton put any money into her campaign. It was other people that gave money. Let's look at a couple other people outside of Kennedy's, like Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan took $6.4 million out of his own money into the campaign, which was 10% of the total budget. Let's look at Ross Perot, who didn't win, but he self-funded 97% of his 1992 presidential campaign. He got all the way up to 21%. He didn't win, but he caused Bush to lose, and he caused Clinton to win. Let's look at Trump. When it comes down to Trump in 2016, he funded 72% of his 2016 presidential campaign. To kind of put that into perspective, Hillary Clinton spent more money on her campaign in 2016, and she put nothing into it. Just to kind of tell you, one got money from the institutions, the other one was his own money, 72% of it. So before you get excited about this, what's the risk? There's a risk. John F. Kennedy got assassinated. Ronald Reagan, there was an attempt for assassination. Trump, character assassination. Ross Perot never won. So we would never know what would happen to him if he spent 97% of his money to go up against the establishment. So you may watch this and say, Pat, I feel like I relate to the anti-establishment, but I wish I had a Joseph Kennedy as a father to do this. You're right. I'm not sitting here and telling you not to. I'm telling you, go make your money. There's three different types of rich. The first is those that are rich, but they're boring. They don't know how to create a following. Could be Bloomberg. Number two, those that are rich, but they're willing to sell out, meaning anything for me to become president because I want to get that status on my title, right? Then there are those who have the money, who are fighters, who are true believers, and who are charismatic. That last one, that is very hard. If you got somebody like that is willing to go up against the establishment, that is very problematic because that person cannot be controlled, and they create tens of millions of followers, which drives the establishment insane. Okay, so let's take a look at which one of the establishment didn't like John F. Kennedy. First one being the CIA. JFK was known to being critical of the CIA, especially after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. He also reported wanted to reform the CIA, which he saw as being too powerful and secretive. For example, after Castro led a revolution that overthrew the Cuban government in '59, the CIA wanted to conduct an operation to overthrow Castro. Eisenhower did not want to make this big of a decision so close to the end of his presidency, so the CIA urged JFK to approve the operation month after his inauguration, and it goes terribly. Now, JFK fires CIA Director Allen Dulles after the Bay of Pigs invasion in '61. Dulles was the director of CIA since 1953, and JFK believed that the CIA had not been honest with him about the chance of success, which led to him firing Richard Bezell Jr., the deputy director of the CIA. And in many of JFK's biographies, there's a quote that's referenced there multiple times: I'm going to splinter the CIA in 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And there's even a recording of JFK speaking to a group of reporters in 1961 when he says the following: I think it's time we had a complete reorganization of the CIA. It's become an arm of the State Department instead of an arm of the president. JFK eventually did order a reorganization of the CIA. Obviously, the CIA didn't like this. The establishment didn't like this because the CIA was a good way of controlling people, the oblivious. Now, the second one was the mafia. Some people may say, Pat, the mafia establishment, isn't that like the ultimate anti-establishment? Yes, but the mafia bought the establishment, so they became the establishment, so they had to protect the establishment. So the Kennedy family comes in saying, hey, if you help us become president, we're going to help you out and we're not even going to look your way. And then all of a sudden they win. The mafia helps them, Chicago, all this stuff. Next thing you know, after they win, the Kennedy family's like, hey, we kind of want to back off a little bit. RFK starts going after them and says, what are you doing here? You're making our life hard. Then they go to the establishment. They start talking. Now, both the establishment and the mafia team up to go up against Kennedy, hence the anti-establishment family. Next, he was not a fan of the Federal Reserve, and that's purely establishment. Here's what happened. JFK was critical of the Federal Reserve and wanted to reform it. He believed that the Federal Reserve was too powerful and that it was not accountable to the American people. Executive Order 11110 was issued by President Kennedy on June 4th of 1963. This was a significant impact on the Federal Reserve. The order delegated to the Secretary of Treasury that the President's authority to issue silver certificates, meaning that the Federal Reserve would no longer be sole issuer of currency in the United States. So what this did is it reduced the power of the Federal Reserve, it increased the power of the Secretary of the Treasury, it created uncertainty about the future of the Federal Reserve, and it led to speculation about the future of the gold standard. All right, this next one is a big one. It's one you push around, bad things happen to you. It's the military-industrial complex, which Eisenhower warned against this in one of his speeches. Here's what he said.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
So JFK saw this and he continued the criticism of the military-industrial complex, and he wanted to reduce its influence. He wanted to ensure that the military was not used for economic or political gain, and JFK had constant disagreements with his advisors about the Vietnam War and was reluctant to get involved in the war, but he was eventually persuaded by his advisors to send military advisors to South Vietnam. However, he was always opposed to sending combat troops to Vietnam, and he reportedly wanted to find a way to end the war without escalating through American involvement. The next one was the establishment candidate, Lyndon Johnson, who could not stand John F. Kennedy because John F. Kennedy was everything Lyndon Johnson wanted to be. Charming, charismatic, great speaker. People loved him. And Lyndon Johnson didn't have that. But Lyndon Johnson was more ambitious. He wanted to be a president so bad. John F. Kennedy really didn't want to be a president. It was his dad's vision that eventually became his vision. But Lyndon, it was his vision. I want to be in power one day. Let me give you a couple examples of why this is important. Handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy and Johnson disagreed about how to respond to the Soviet Union's placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba. Kennedy wanted to make a more cautious approach while Johnson wanted to take a more aggressive approach. The Vietnam War. Kennedy and Johnson also disagreed about the war. Kennedy had authorized the sending of military advisors to Vietnam, but he had not authorized the sending of combat troops. Johnson, on the other hand, escalated the war by sending combat troops to Vietnam. By the way, right after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, you know what Lyndon Johnson did? He escalated American involvement in the war, immediately sending troops to Vietnam, and he committed the United States to a war that lasted an entire decade. The next one was the oil companies that John F. Kennedy wanted to go up against, and obviously they're not going to be too happy about it. But remember, the oil companies had a friend, an ally. His name was Lyndon Johnson, which he was from Texas. And this John F. Kennedy keeps getting in the way of these guys making money. John F. Kennedy was very critical of oil companies and wanted to regulate them more effectively. He believed that the oil companies were too powerful and were not accountable to the American people. RFK, AG of the U.S., used the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute oil companies. RFK was a strong critic of the oil industry, and he believed that the companies were engaging in anti-competitive practices. The DOJ's antitrust division, this lawsuit led to the largest antitrust settlement in the history at the time, and it forced the oil companies to change their business practices. And last but not least was the Cold War, which it kind of links to the CIA and it kind of links to military-industrial complex. He wanted to take a complete different approach with Russia, and here's what it was. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the NSA wanted Kennedy to bomb Cuba and harshly retaliate against the USSR. But the speech President Kennedy gave at American University on June 10, 1963 was a major departure from the Cold War rhetoric at the time. In this speech, JFK called for a re-examination of American attitudes towards the Soviet Union and a new approach to peace. He also proposed several specific steps to reduce tensions between the two superpowers, including a ban on nuclear testing and a joint space program. This infuriated a lot of people in the intelligence agencies and military. So you're probably still asking a question, Pat. This is crazy. I understand. It's a great episode. Where are you going with this? Is this a political message on who I should vote for? I think I kind of read between the lines. Here's all I'm saying to you. Elon Musk part of the anti-establishment. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Apple, anti-establishment. Political people, Reagan, Kennedy, Trump, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was originally part of the anti-establishment until he caved. And he said, I can't do this. Why? Because it's hard. It's hard. It sucks. It's tough. It's lonely before everybody shows up. But you stay true to your values and principles. And if that's important to you, you got to do the fight. And by the way, yes, when it comes down to political affiliation, who you vote for, you got to look for this. If you don't, a great country like America or whatever country you're a part of, the more and more and more the establishment controls it, the more and more and more it goes away from what it was founded on. Let me explain it to you. I'm going to give you 3 examples to validate my point. By the way, before anybody says anything, there's nothing about this message that's about going and breaking the laws. Zero. Breaking the rules? Yes. Breaking the laws? That's not what we're talking about. 3 examples of what happens. Vanderbilt made so much money, was the richest man in the world. You know how many generations the money lasted? 2. You know why? Because the second generation was spoiled. They didn't know what to do with the money. America right now started off for what? Going against the establishment. What was the establishment? British establishment. Like, listen, man, leave us alone. We want freedom. Boom! We win. We're free. But we have to earn that freedom. You and I in America, we ain't fighting for that freedom the way they fought for the freedom, but we still have to fight for this freedom. But some of the people are just kind of like warm and fuzzy. Well, I'm part of the establishment. I'll give you another one. Hollywood. Look what Hollywood did. Well, Hollywood, isn't it the establishment today? Today it is. But when Hollywood first got started in the 20s and they moved from New Jersey. New Jersey, yes. Thomas Edison had all these controls on the entertainment industry. They said, we're leaving Jersey. We're going to Hollywood. Why? Because they were sick of the establishment. Guess what Hollywood is today? The establishment. Do you know in 1920s, 95% of movies in America were made in Hollywood? You know what it is today? 55%. Why? Because Hollywood has become an establishment. Stay alert, stay alive, pay very close attention to your industry, to your family, to your peers, to your government, to the economy. Every single thing you look at, stay alert, stay alive, and do whatever you can to not be part of the oblivious community, graduate that. I was part of that for a very, very long time. And find a way to be part of the untraditional, free-thinking, anti-elite, this is the way we've always done it. And then freedom will continue for the next generation. But you and I got some fighting to do. Make sense? Anyways, got you thinking. You're probably going to a completely different place right now. That's fine. If you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If it creates controversy and conversation, share it with others and debate each other. And if you like this video, I got another video I want you to watch. It's how to go up against the Goliath, the anti-establishment of your industry. If you've never seen this video, click here to watch it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye.